again, this is Georgia with Puking Pastilles. In this segment of our Learn to Sew series, we will be learning how to pin and sew a seam. So let's get started. The seam I will be making in this segment is the inseam on the pants, and this is generally where you start on a pants pattern. Before I start sewing and taking off the pattern pieces, however, you'll notice that the back and the front pieces look very similar. You need to be able to differentiate between the two as you're sewing, so I'm going to mark my back pieces with chalk. You can buy tailor's chalk at the fabric store. I actually use just regular chalk that we get with the kids' sidewalk chalk. It's the same. I'm going to mark a B lightly where I can see it on both pieces. Some people like to clip into the seams, but as you finish them, that goes away and you won't be able to see it anymore. So we're going to go ahead and take off our pattern piece from the back, and I just need one of these. And then take off your front pattern piece. Again, I just need one. And I need the one that will be sewn with this, so that top one. When you sew a seam, with very few exceptions, you want the right sides to be facing. So the side that you want to see in your finished garment will be facing each other to make the seam. You will match your raw edges. The raw edge is the part that you cut. And then you pin it. And you always pin perpendicular to the seam that you will be sewing. Not only does this prevent you from poking yourself, it makes it easier to pull them out as you're sewing. Okay, let's go sew this seam. In order to sew a seam, first it needs to be pinned like we've already done. We also need to know what seam allowance to use. The seam allowance is the width between where you're stitching, your stitching line, and the edge of your fabric, your raw edge. And in this pattern it's 5/8 of an inch. The marking is right here on my faceplate. It'll look different on yours, but I have another marking down here, this little dash line. So I'm going to make sure that this raw edge runs along that line the whole time I'm sewing, and that way you have a nice even seam line. So I'll lower my presser foot onto my fabric and begin to sew, and I always back stitch at the beginning and at the end. I'm back stitching and going forward again, and then I stop to take out my pins. And very carefully guide it. Don't push it, don't pull it, just guide the fabric. Your machine does all the other work. Again, I'm still staying on this 5/8 of an inch guideline. Here's the sewn seam backstitched at the beginning and the end.